Security dragged Black woman CEO out of bank. 3B in deposits vanish in hours. The morning had started like any other for her, yet she had no idea that the day would turn into one she would never forget. She was a woman who carried herself with quiet confidence, someone who had climbed from the lowest places to the highest levels of business. She was not just any leader. She was a Black woman who had built her own empire brick by brick. Every decision she had made, every risk she had taken, had led to her position as CEO of one of the fastest-growing corporations in the country. That morning, she walked into the glass doors of a major bank, the kind of place where tall buildings and polished marble floors tried to speak of power. Her company had trusted this institution with billions in deposits. She was here for an important meeting, one that would shape financial moves worth more than most people could imagine. Her mind was calm but focused, her steps strong. Yet beneath the tailored suit and calm face was a heart that remembered every battle she had fought to get here. She had grown up in a neighborhood where most children never dreamed of success. She had seen doors shut in her face and people tell her she did not belong. But over time, she had learned to stop waiting for permission. She had learned to fight for every inch, to claim her place even when no one wanted to offer it. Today, she walked into that bank not as someone begging to be recognized, but as someone who had already proven her worth. The moment she approached the reception desk, though, the atmosphere shifted. The woman at the counter looked her up and down, her eyes narrowing as though she could not believe the CEO standing in front of her was who she claimed to be. The bank's lobby was filled with quiet murmurs, business people waiting for appointments, the smell of expensive coffee lingering in the air. She calmly introduced herself, explaining that she had a meeting scheduled with senior executives. Instead of being welcomed, she was met with suspicion. The receptionist asked her to wait and made a phone call, her voice low but sharp. Minutes later, 2 men in black suits appeared from the back. They were not executives, they were security. The guards walked up to her, their presence heavy, their faces firm. "You need to come with us," one said. She frowned, confused. "There must be a mistake. I am here for a meeting." But before she could finish, one of them lightly grabbed her arm. The other gestured toward the door. "You do not belong here. Let us escort you out." The words cut deeper than the grip on her arm. She felt her chest tighten. She was the CEO of a billion-dollar company, a client who had placed trust and deposits into this very institution, and yet in their eyes she was someone to be dragged out, someone who did not deserve to stand inside. "Wait," she said firmly, her voice steady even as anger boiled beneath her skin. "You are making a serious mistake. I am not trespassing. Ma'am, do not make this harder." The second guard interrupted, his tone dismissive. Around her, people in the lobby began whispering. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others pulled out their phones, capturing the scene on camera. She could hear snippets of their murmurs. What did she do? Who is she? Why are they dragging her out? Her heart pounded, but she refused to bow her head. She straightened her shoulders and tried to speak louder. "I am the CEO of Horizon Global Enterprises. My company holds over $3 billion in deposits here. Call your executives right now. They will confirm," but her words fell on deaf ears. The guards tightened their grip, pulling her toward the entrance. Her phone buzzed in her hand and she quickly answered, trying to steady her voice. It was her chief financial officer on the line. "They are dragging me out," she said through clenched teeth. "Yes, outside the lobby." "No, they will not listen." The CFO's voice shot back with urgency. "This is unacceptable. Do you want me to start?" She could not reply fully because one of the guards barked at her. "You can take your call outside." Her mind raced. It was not just about humiliation anymore. It was about what this act represented. Years of sacrifice, of breaking barriers, of proving her worth, and still she was judged in a heartbeat, dismissed as if she were invisible. But she was not invisible. And she knew it. As the guards pushed her through the revolving glass doors, she caught her reflection. For a moment, she saw the younger version of herself, a girl who had once been told she would never succeed, a girl who had been laughed at for dreaming big. That girl had fought to become the woman she was today, a woman who led thousands of employees, who made decisions that impacted entire industries. The humiliation burned. She could feel eyes on her, the weight of judgment, the sting of being treated as though she did not belong. But instead of breaking her, the fire inside her only grew. When she finally stepped onto the sidewalk outside, her CFO's voice still in her ear, she made a choice. Her tone was steady, sharper now, a voice of steel beneath the pain. "Pull the deposits," she said calmly. "All of it. Every dollar. 3 billion. Transfer it out." There was silence on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Are you sure?" She nodded to herself, though no one could see it. "Yes, start the process immediately. They will know who I am soon enough." The guards released her, their job done, their faces blank as if they had just removed a stranger who had no right to be there. But they had not removed a stranger. They had just humiliated one of their bank's most powerful clients. As she stood on the pavement, the cameras still rolling, she looked up at the towering glass building. Her chest was tight, but not from shame anymore. From determination. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The humiliation had happened, yes. But humiliation was not the final word. She would decide what came next. And what came next would shake not just this bank, but an entire industry. Long before anyone ever called her CEO, she was just a little girl with a notebook full of dreams. She grew up in a place where the sound of ambition was drowned out by sirens and arguments, where families often struggled just to keep the lights on. Her neighborhood was not the kind of place where people talked about building companies or managing billions. Most children there were told to survive, not to dream. But even as a child, she carried something inside her that could not be silenced. Belief. She remembered her mother sitting at the kitchen table, stretching a paycheck so thin it seemed like magic. She remembered the disappointment in her father's eyes when he lost yet another job. Not because he was not hardworking, but because opportunities were rare for men like him. She remembered teachers telling her to be realistic when she talked about owning businesses one day. Yet every time someone told her no, her heart whispered louder, "Why not me?" That whisper turned into fuel. She worked harder than anyone around her. While other kids were outside playing, she was studying at the library, reading about people who had built empires from nothing. She memorized stories of entrepreneurs, leaders, and inventors who refused to give up. She carried those stories with her like armor, but it was not just about books. She learned resilience the hard way. She faced insults, bias, and countless rejections. She applied for internships and was told, "We already filled the spot," only to see others accepted. She walked into boardrooms during her early career and saw the surprise on people's faces when they realized she was not the assistant, but the one leading the meeting. Every time someone underestimated her, it sharpened her focus. Her first business idea came when she was still in college. She noticed a gap. Local businesses in her community had no online presence. They were good people, hardworking people, but they were being left behind in the digital age. So she started helping them build websites and online stores. At first she charged almost nothing, but word spread. Soon she was running a small digital agency out of her dorm room. She hired other students, created packages, and grew her client base. By graduation, what started as a side hustle had turned into a six-figure business. Still, she wanted more. She sold that business, taking the profits and investing in her next idea. This time she moved into logistics, helping companies streamline their supply chains. Everyone told her it was too big an industry for someone like her. But she studied it piece by piece until she understood it better than most experts. She traveled to warehouses, rode with truck drivers, and met factory workers. She wanted to understand every link in the chain. Her hands-on approach set her apart. While others worked behind desks, she built relationships on the ground. Success did not come overnight. There were years when she barely paid herself, pouring every cent back into the company. There were nights when she lay awake wondering if she had made a mistake. Banks rejected her loans, investors ignored her, and even her own friends sometimes doubted her. But she pressed forward. Slowly, her company began to grow. Contracts rolled in, employees were hired, and within a decade she was running a corporation worth billions. Through it all, she never forgot where she came from. She made it a point to mentor young entrepreneurs, especially women and minorities who were told no as often as she once had been. She set up scholarships, funded community projects, and gave opportunities to people others overlooked. Her story was more than a rise to power. It was proof that resilience could turn pain into fuel. She did not just build an empire. She built it on a foundation of every rejection, every insult, and every moment she was told she did not belong. That is why what happened in the bank lobby cut so deep. Standing there as security dragged her out, she was not just fighting for herself. She was carrying the weight of her past, of her community. of every barrier she had broken. To be dismissed so quickly reminded her of the very battles she thought she had left behind. But there was one difference now. She was no longer the young woman begging for opportunities. She was the leader of a multi-billion-dollar company. She had influence, power, and resources. And this time, she would not let anyone reduce her to invisibility. As she looked back on her journey, one truth echoed in her heart. Success was never given to her. It was taken, earned, and built. If she could build her empire from nothing, then she could certainly reclaim her dignity now. Her past was not a weakness. It was her strength. And soon, the world was going to see exactly what kind of strength she carried. The humiliation should have ended at the glass doors of the bank, but in the modern world, nothing stays hidden. Within minutes, the video of her being dragged outside had spread across social media. A young man in the lobby who had recorded the entire scene on his phone uploaded it with the caption, "This is how they treat a CEO with 3 Bs in deposits? Shameful." The clip was less than a minute long, but it carried the weight of history. It showed her standing tall in her suit, phone to her ear, refusing to lower her voice as she declared who she was. It showed the guards gripping her arms and pushing her toward the doors while she repeated, "I am the CEO of Horizon Global Enterprises." And then it showed the final shot, her standing outside the building, staring up at the bank's shining logo with a face full of determination. By the time she returned to her office, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Reporters wanted statements. Employees were sending messages of outrage. Allies in business circles were demanding explanations. Her executive assistant met her at the door with wide eyes. "Ma'am, it's everywhere," she said softly. "Twitter, LinkedIn, even the morning news shows are talking about it." Everyone saw what happened. The CEO set her bag down, keeping her expression calm even as her mind burned with thoughts. "Good," she replied. "Let them talk." She walked into the boardroom, where her senior executives were already gathered. They looked at her with a mix of anger and admiration. Her CFO stood up immediately. "We've already started the transfer," he said. $3 billion is leaving their accounts as we speak. But I need your confirmation to finish." She took a breath and looked around the room. Her team was more than employees. They were people who had believed in her when few others had. Some had been with her since the early days when their office was a cramped warehouse with second-hand desks. Now they were leaders of a global empire. "This is not about me alone," she said, her voice clear. "This is about respect. If they can treat us this way after everything we've built, then they do not deserve to hold even a single dollar of our trust. Pull the money. All of it." The CFO nodded, already dialing in his team to finalize the orders. But the story did not stop there. By the afternoon, hashtags were trending worldwide. "Gosh, she belongs." "Gosh, CEO humiliated." "Respect her power." Ordinary people shared the video with captions like, "If this can happen to her, imagine what happens to the rest of us." Community leaders called it a moment of truth. News anchors replayed the video again and again, analyzing every frame. Her employees rallied too. Hundreds posted messages online, sharing their pride in working for her. One wrote, "Our CEO has fought for us from day one. If you think a few security guards can shake her, you don't know her strength." Another said, "This isn't just a CEO. This is a woman who built an empire and lifted thousands with her. We stand with her." Even competitors in the business world spoke up, some out of genuine respect, others because they saw opportunity in aligning with her. One billionaire entrepreneur tweeted, "Discrimination has no place in finance or business." Standing with Horizon Global today, the pressure began to mount on the bank. Calls flooded their headquarters demanding explanations. Their PR team rushed to draft statements. But every word they released only made things worse. People wanted accountability, not excuses. Shareholders grew nervous watching billions drain from the bank's reserves in real time. Meanwhile, the CEO remained silent. She issued no press release, no emotional outburst. She simply worked behind closed doors, coordinating with her financial officers, ensuring every transfer was executed smoothly. Silence, she knew, was more powerful than any statement. Let them wonder what she was planning. That evening, she returned home late. For the first time all day, she allowed herself to sit quietly. She looked out the window at the city skyline, the lights glowing against the dark sky. The humiliation from the morning still stung, but now it felt different. It was no longer just a personal wound. It was fuel. She thought about the little girl she used to be, scribbling dreams in a notebook. She thought about her mother stretching paychecks, her father searching for work. She thought about every boardroom where she had been underestimated, every deal where she had been doubted. This moment at the bank was not new. It was simply another reminder of the battles she had fought her entire life. But unlike the past, she now had power. And she would use it. The boiling point had arrived. The world had seen the injustice. Her people were behind her, and the bank had no idea what storm was about to hit them. She whispered to herself as she closed her eyes. They thought they dragged me out. They have no idea what I am about to drag them into. The next morning, the headlines confirmed it. Horizon Global withdraws $3 billion from banking giant after CEO humiliated. Stock prices trembled, investors panicked, and the financial world braced itself. The humiliation had become a movement, and she was ready to lead it. The morning after the incident, the city's newspapers carried her story on their front pages. Online platforms were flooded with millions of comments, debates, and questions. Who was she? How could a woman who controlled billions be treated this way? How could a bank so powerful make such a mistake? But while the world raged and speculated, she was already moving with precision. She had not risen to the top by reacting emotionally. She had learned long ago that anger without strategy was wasted energy. Every decision now had to be deliberate, measured, and sharp. Her first move was financial. The withdrawal of $3 billion was not just a transfer, it was a statement. It was proof that she was not bluffing, proof that her company's power was not in speeches but in numbers. Money talks, and in the world of finance, nothing screamed louder than billions disappearing overnight. The bank executives scrambled. They sent emails, voicemails, desperate requests for meetings. They offered apologies and explanations. It was a misunderstanding, they said. We regret the actions of our staff. But apologies, she knew, were not enough. Respect could not be begged for after the fact. It had to be given in the moment. Her second move was quiet but powerful. She reached out to allies in industries that relied heavily on the bank. Over the years, she had built relationships with other CEOs, leaders, and entrepreneurs who admired her journey. Many of them had faced discrimination themselves, though not always publicly. She called them not with demands, but with a question. Do you still trust your money with them after what happened? One by one, they hesitated. One by one, they admitted their doubts. And one by one, they began making plans to move their accounts too. The bank did not just lose her deposits. They began to bleed from every corner as others followed her lead. Her third move was public but subtle. She still did not give interviews, but she allowed her employees and supporters to speak for her. She knew the power of storytelling, and she understood that sometimes silence from the leader created more anticipation than words. Every time someone asked her for a statement, she simply replied, "My actions are my statement." And they were. By the end of the week, the bank had lost over $5 billion in deposits. Their stock price plummeted. Analysts on financial news channels debated if the institution could survive the scandal. All because they had underestimated one woman. But she was not done. Inside her office, she gathered her leadership team. They sat around the long mahogany table, the atmosphere tense but charged with energy. She looked at each of them in turn, her eyes steady. "This is not about revenge," she began. "This is about respect. We will not fight with anger. We will fight with strategy. If we do this right, we will not only protect our dignity, we will set a new standard for how the world treats people like us." Her COO leaned forward. "What do you propose?" She smiled faintly. "We build our own solution." And with that, she unveiled her plan. Instead of relying on institutions that failed to value their clients, she would invest in creating financial pathways for businesses and individuals who were often ignored. She would take the money the bank had lost and turn it into opportunities for others. She would prove that power was not just about holding wealth, but about directing it with purpose. The room fell silent as her executives processed the vision. It was bold, risky, and ambitious. But then again, so was everything she had ever done. Her employees erupted in support. "Let's do it," her CFO said. "Let's show them what we're capable of." And so the power play moved into its next phase. Outside her walls, the world kept watching. Protesters gathered in front of the bank's headquarters, holding signs that read, "Respect women in power and money walks." Editorials called her the symbol of a new era of leadership. Universities began inviting her to speak about resilience and equality. She declined most invitations, focusing on her mission. Meanwhile, the bank spiraled. Their CEO held a press conference, voice shaking as he tried to convince clients that their money was safe. But it was too late. The story was no longer about the bank, it was about her. She understood something they did not. Power is not about control. It is about influence. And right now she influenced the entire financial world. Late one evening, she sat in her office alone, the city lights stretching endlessly outside her window. She thought about how quickly life could turn, how one moment of humiliation could transform into a movement. She thought about the little girl who once wondered if her dreams were too big. That girl would never have imagined this, leading not just a company but a revolution of respect. Her phone buzzed. A message from a young woman she had mentored years ago lit up the screen. It read, "I saw what happened. Thank you for showing us that dignity matters more than anything. You give us hope." She smiled softly. Hope. That was what this was all about. Not just fighting for herself, but for the next generation who would no longer have to beg for a seat at the table. The humiliation had been painful, yes, but it had also given her a gift, the chance to show the world that she was not someone to be dismissed. She was someone to be remembered, and this was only the beginning of her power play. The storm that had started with one act of humiliation grew larger by the day. By the end of the week, the bank's once shining reputation was in freefall. Their headquarters, a tall tower of steel and glass, no longer looked like a fortress of power. Reporters camped outside, their cameras rolling 24 hours a day. Protesters carried signs, chanting slogans that echoed across the streets. Every headline, every conversation seemed to circle back to one story: the bank that dragged out the black woman CEO and lost billions. Inside the walls of the institution, panic spread like fire. The boardroom that once hosted calm discussions of quarterly profits now echoed with shouts and accusations. Executives who had always prided themselves on control now scrambled to contain the damage. Some argued they should reach out to her again with apologies, gifts, and promises. Others insisted on staying quiet, hoping the storm would pass. But the storm was not passing. It was growing stronger by the hour. The withdrawals had become a flood. What started as $3 billion leaving their accounts had turned into double, then triple, as other companies followed her lead. Smaller businesses, inspired by her strength, pulled their money too. The bank's stock price sank every morning when the market opened, and analysts openly questioned whether the institution could survive the blow. In the trading floors, employees who once walked with pride now moved with nervous energy. Phones rang endlessly with worried clients. Some bankers even whispered among themselves that they should look for jobs elsewhere before the collapse dragged them under too. While the bank's leaders struggled, she remained calm. Her company continued its work, growing stronger by the day. She did not spend her energy on press conferences or dramatic speeches. Instead, she let her silence be a force. She had already made her statement the moment she gave the order to withdraw billions. Every day the bank trembled, that silence spoke louder than any words. Yet even in her calm, she was watching. She monitored the headlines, the market reports, the letters released by the bank. She noted how quickly fear could spread when trust was broken. She understood something the bank had forgotten. Money was not just numbers. It was trust, and trust once lost was almost impossible to regain. The collapse grew more public when the bank's CEO finally stepped onto a stage to address the crisis. Cameras flashed as he adjusted his tie, his face pale and tired. Behind him, the company's logo gleamed, but its shine no longer carried weight. His voice shook as he said, "We regret the events that occurred last week. We are committed to diversity, equality, and rebuilding trust with our clients." But as he spoke, a journalist raised her hand and cut in sharply. "If you are committed, then why did your guards drag out a client worth billions? Why did no one inside recognize her?" The question silenced the room. The CEO stammered, offered vague excuses, and the press conference ended in embarrassment. That clip went viral too. The world saw not just a bank in crisis, but a leader who had no answers. Meanwhile, she continued to move forward. In her own headquarters, she met with her executives and employees, reminding them of their purpose. "We did not build this company to be accepted by others," she said firmly. "We built it to set our own standard. Let this serve as a lesson, not only for us, but for everyone watching. Respect is not given because of numbers in an account. It is given because of who we are." Her words fueled her team. They worked with more energy than ever, knowing they were part of something bigger than business. They were part of history being written in real time. The collapse deepened when major investors announced they were cutting ties with the bank. One after another, firms released statements saying they could no longer trust an institution that failed so spectacularly in leadership and judgment. With every statement, the bank's stock fell lower. Their market value shrank by billions, and experts on television spoke bluntly. This is a crisis of trust, and trust cannot be bought back with apologies. For ordinary people watching, her story became a source of inspiration. Parents told their children about her courage. Young entrepreneurs saw her as proof that they could rise no matter the obstacles. On social media, videos of her calm defiance in the lobby played beside motivational captions. Stand tall. Know your worth. Never let anyone tell you that you do not belong. Even employees inside the collapsing bank began whispering about her with a strange kind of respect. Some admitted quietly, "She showed us what real power looks like." By the second week, rumors spread that the government might need to step in to stabilize the bank. But even that could not erase the truth. The bank had fallen because they failed to recognize the worth of one woman. She watched all of it unfold with a steady gaze. She did not rejoice in their pain. She was not looking for revenge. What she wanted was a lesson, not just for the bank, but for the entire world. And as the collapse grew worse, that lesson became clearer. Never underestimate the person you think does not belong. Late one night, she walked alone through her office halls. The city outside glowed with restless energy, but inside she felt calm. She stopped at a window, looking at the skyline, and whispered softly to herself, "They thought they broke me. But look who is breaking now." The collapse was not just financial. It was symbolic. A message written across the world that dignity could not be dragged out of a lobby, that respect was not negotiable, and as the bank crumbled, she was already planning the next step, not just for herself, but for the future she wanted to build for others. The collapse of the bank was not the end of the story. It was the turning point that set the stage for something far greater. The collapse of the bank was a storm that shook the financial world, but for her, it was never about destruction. It was about transformation. The humiliation that started this journey had opened a doorway to something greater than she had ever planned. She had not just withdrawn money, she had withdrawn trust. And the whole world had seen what happened when trust was betrayed. The morning after the bank's stock hit its lowest point, she sat in her office, surrounded by silence. The noise outside, the reporters, the debates, the arguments did not reach her here. What reached her was the steady stream of emails, messages, and letters pouring in from people she had never met. Young women wrote, "You showed me I do not have to be afraid to walk into a room where no one looks like me." Small business owners shared, "You gave me courage to stand up for my worth." Even students wrote essays about her story, calling her an icon of resilience. Her assistant brought in a stack of printed letters one morning, setting them gently on her desk. "These keep coming every hour," she said. "People are calling you a hero." The CEO touched the letters softly, her fingers tracing the words of strangers who felt connected to her journey. She closed her eyes for a moment. She never wanted to be a symbol, but if her pain could ignite strength in others, then maybe that was her true purpose all along. That week, she finally broke her silence. She agreed to one interview, broadcast live to millions. She appeared not with anger or bitterness, but with calm, steady grace. Dressed in a simple suit, she looked directly into the camera and spoke. "This is not just about me," she began. "It is about every person who has been told they do not belong. It is about every hand that has been pushed aside, every voice that has been silenced, every dream that has been dismissed. What happened to me is not new. It happens every day to people who may not have the platform to fight back. But I want to say this clearly. Dignity is not negotiable. Respect is not negotiable. And when you know your worth, you do not beg for it, you demand it." The studio fell silent. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. Across the world, people listening felt as though she was speaking directly to them. Hashtags began trending again, this time not about humiliation, but about triumph. "Know your worth, a respect eyes power." She stood tall. Her triumph was not just measured in headlines. It was visible in her company too. Horizon Global had not only survived the chaos, it had grown. New partners wanted to work with her. Talented professionals sought jobs in her organization because they wanted to be part of her vision. Shareholders saw their trust in her leadership rewarded as the company's value soared. One afternoon, she gathered her employees in the headquarters auditorium. Thousands sat before her waiting, their faces full of pride. She stood on stage and said, "They tried to drag me out of a building, but I stand here today because no one can drag you away from your purpose. This company was built on resilience, and together, we will prove that no obstacle can stop us." The crowd erupted into applause, many standing, some even wiping away tears. Her triumph echoed in unexpected places too. In schools, teachers used her story to encourage children to never give up. In churches, pastors mentioned her as an example of faith in action. In community centers, people told each other, "If she can do it, so can we." Even within the financial industry, her triumph left a mark. Policies shifted. Institutions scrambled to show diversity training, equity programs, and customer respect initiatives. Many of them did it to save face, but it was proof that her stand had forced change. She received invitations to speak at global summits, to sit on panels with presidents and prime ministers, to be the voice of a new movement. She accepted some, but turned down many. She knew her true calling was not to sit on stages, but to keep building, keep creating opportunities for others. One evening, after a long day, she sat at home with her mother. The same woman who once stretched paychecks at the kitchen table now looked at her daughter with tears of pride. "You have gone further than I ever dreamed," her mother whispered. The CEO smiled softly. "I just wanted to make sure no one else had to fight as hard as we did." Her mother squeezed her hand. "And you did more than that. You gave them hope," that word again, hope. It followed her everywhere now. It was not just her triumph. It was the triumph of everyone who had been told no and decided to rise anyway. The bank's collapse would go down in history books, but so would her response. She had not screamed, she had not cursed, she had not begged. She had acted with quiet strength, proving that the greatest power is not noise but resolve. Her triumph was not in the fall of the bank. Her triumph was in the rise of her own voice, her own company, her own movement. She had taken humiliation and turned it into history, and deep down she knew this was only the beginning. Years later, people would still talk about that day in the bank lobby. The video would continue to circulate online, shown in classrooms, leadership seminars, and community gatherings. But when people told the story, they did not only talk about the humiliation, they talked about what came after, the courage, the resolve, and the change it sparked. For her, the incident became a chapter in a much larger book. She never wanted to be remembered only as the woman dragged out of a bank. She wanted to be remembered as the leader who transformed that moment into a movement, and she succeeded. In the years that followed, Horizon Global grew into more than just a corporation. Under her leadership, it became a symbol of resilience and dignity. She used her resources to create scholarships for underprivileged students, to build programs that supported women entrepreneurs, and to fund innovation in communities that banks had ignored for decades. Every project carried the same message. Your worth is not decided by others, it is decided by you. Her story reached across borders. In countries she had never visited, young girls hung posters of her in their rooms, inspired by her strength. Business schools studied her decisions, not only as financial strategy but as moral leadership. Politicians quoted her words when speaking about equality and respect. But perhaps her most profound legacy was the people she mentored directly. Dozens of young leaders who once sat in her office as interns or assistants went on to start their own companies, foundations, and organizations. Whenever they were asked who inspired them, they always said her name. One of them, a young woman who had grown up in poverty just like her, once stood on a stage accepting an award and said, "She taught me that dignity is not something you wait for, it is something you demand. And because of her, I know I belong in every room I enter." Those were the words that echoed her legacy more than any headline or stock report ever could. The bank that had humiliated her never fully recovered. Though they survived through mergers and government assistance, they were no longer respected the way they once were. For years, every mention of their name came with a shadow of shame. Their story became a warning. Institutions that fail to respect their clients will pay a price far greater than money. She, on the other hand, rose higher. Awards, honors, and recognitions followed her, but she accepted them with humility. She always reminded people, "I am not here because of wealth. I am here because I refuse to let others define my worth. As time passed, she began writing her memoir. In it, she told the story of her childhood, her struggles, her triumphs, and that one unforgettable day at the bank. She wrote not with bitterness but with clarity, turning pain into lessons for others. The book became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages. Readers across the world felt her words as if she was speaking directly to them. Toward the end of her life, when she had already built more than most could dream of, she often returned to the communities she came from. She walked through schools where children now had computers and libraries funded by her company. She visited neighborhoods where small businesses thrived because of her programs. She listened to the people, reminding herself that true success was not measured by skyscrapers or boardrooms, but by the lives touched along the way. One day, standing in front of a group of young students, she told them, "Do not let the world tell you where you belong. Walk into every room as if you own your place there. And if someone tries to drag you out, remember, your worth does not leave with you. It stays inside you, unshakable." The children clapped, their eyes shining with hope. Her legacy was not just about billions of dollars or corporate victories. It was about dignity, respect, and the courage to stand tall when the world tried to push you down. It was about showing people that humiliation can become history, that pain can become power, and that one act of resilience can change the course of an entire industry. When she finally passed away, the world mourned her not just as a CEO but as a symbol of strength. Tributes poured in from presidents, business leaders, community workers, and ordinary people whose lives she had touched. They all told the same story. A woman who refused to be silenced. A leader who proved that true power is not in wealth but in dignity. Her company continued to thrive under the leadership of those she had mentored, carrying her vision forward. Her name lived on not just in history books, but in the everyday courage of people who remembered her story. The image of her standing outside the bank, humiliated but unbroken, became iconic. But more powerful than that image was what followed: the empire she built, the respect she demanded, and the hope she gave to millions. Her legacy was clear. You cannot drag out a woman who knows her worth. You cannot silence a voice that speaks with truth, and you cannot destroy a spirit that turns humiliation into triumph.